Welcome to the official Heisman Trophy podcast.
Hello, Chuck Conrad with a kickoff. Boy, has a strong leg, end over end. Sanders takes it 1 yard deep in the end zone. Up the middle, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35. He's at the 40, he's at 45, 50, 45, 40, 35, 30, 25, 20, 50, 10, 5, touchdown. He did good. Just like last year, a same start.
And the winner is...
Here's your host, Chris Houston.
Welcome to episode 14 of season 2 of the official Heisman Trophy podcast. There's about 3.5 weeks left until the 2024 Heisman Trophy ceremony takes place in New York. And it looks for now like we have a favorite to win the trophy, Travis Hunter, wide receiver and cornerback of Colorado. He's the leader in the clubhouse right now. Not a fait accompli by any means. There are still some games left to be played, some very big games left to be played, and things could still shake up quite a bit. One little note, 30 years ago this season, 1994 Heisman Trophy winner Rashaan Salaam won Colorado's only Heisman Trophy, so potentially Hunter could be the second on the 30th anniversary of their first win. We've got another great show lined up for you today. Ralph Russo of The Athletic, formerly the college football writer for the Associated Press for about 30 years, he joins us today to talk about his new position at The Athletic and also to opine on everything from the playoff to the Heisman to officiating, you name it, we talked about it. And then coming up in our B block, do you ever wonder what it's like to get an interception? The nation's leader in that very category, Noel Williams of the California Golden Bears, comes on the show to break down everything it takes to pick one off. And then after Williams, we're going to talk to perhaps the best tight end in the country. I'm talking Bowling Green's Harold Fannin Jr. He's putting up some crazy numbers for the Falcons. And when it's all said and done, he could just be the Mackey Award winner this year. All right, we're going to get to everything we have planned in the show, but first we're going to talk to Associate Director of the Heisman Trust, Tim Henning, and he's going to let us know about the plans for this year's post-Heisman ceremony banquet that will take place the day after. Tim, how's it going?
What's going on, Chris? Going well. How's everything with you?
Very good, very good. We're getting close to Heisman time, and usually there is a Heisman gala the night after the Heisman, usually on the Sunday night. That's how it's been in recent years. This year, the Heisman Trust is doing things a little bit different. Can you tell us what's happening?
Yeah, absolutely. We've transitioned for the first time in, what we think might be almost 90 years from the traditional black tie gala that we've had to actually a brunch format this year. So many changes going on, obviously, as you're well aware, and, in the college football landscape these days, and with the expansion of the college football playoff schedule, knowing that there's a high likeliness that, the finalist and the newest winner has the potential to potentially play in one of those bowl games. We had some meetings earlier in the spring, and we met with a lot of different constituencies from ESPN to Heisman winners, and spoke to a number of folks in various athletic departments. And we decided to move to a brunch. And we hope that the newest winner, whomever that might be, will be able to stick around for our brunch on Sunday morning, the morning after the TV announcement. Stay for it, and then head home that afternoon so he can get back to campus, assuming, he may have practice or whatnot, rather than him sticking around a whole nother day.
Well, one of the more appropriate things in New York is a brunch. Brunch is very popular in New York City for sure. There's going to be the usual array of past winners. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct. People that have attended our Heisman Dinner Gala before used to kind of, a 2- and 3-tiered dais with various dignitaries, many of which were Heisman winners, but also other dignitaries from the world of college football, previous Heisman humanitarian winners, other folks, again, in the college football industry. This year, we're really focusing, on the winners themselves. The whole theme of the brunch is 90 years of legends, and our dais this year will just feature the Heisman Trophy winners themselves. Right now, we have, I think, about 24 Heisman Trophy winners lined up to attend, which is great. We're hoping to get confirmation of a few more. But yeah, the focus is really to celebrate 90 years of Heisman legends. Obviously, we'll recognize the newest winner, and we'll recognize some of our anniversary recipients, but there'll be a much greater focus on all the Heisman Trophy winners this year for our brunch program.
And there'll be the 50th anniversary winner, like you mentioned, Archie Griffin. At least one of his Heisman trophies will be celebrated. Ron Dane is the 25th anniversary winner. Is he going to be there?
Yep, Archie and Ron will both be here.
Great.
Yep.
And I imagine Marcus Mariota might not be there due to his schedule.
He's playing. I want to say New Orleans. I think.
Okay. All right. Well, and then also the Heisman Humanitarian Award winner. Will that person be at the event?
Yes, it will. And we're really excited that we're honoring Misty Copeland this year. Kind of groundbreaking U.S. ballerina. Really, so we're really excited to honor Misty and recognize all the great work that she's done with her foundation. And that'll be exciting as well.
Well, I'm very excited to talk to Misty eventually because usually I just get to talk to sports figures and she's kind of sports adjacent, athletics adjacent. So that should be very exciting. Can you tell our audience if they happen to be in New York City or if they want to go to New York City and take part in Heisman weekend, what's the best way to go about doing it and what's the best way to find information on the whole process?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, the easiest way is Heisman.com. You go to Heisman.com, the main banner right underneath, right on our website, has a banner where you can click to purchase tickets to attend the brunch. We have in addition to the brunch program itself that we talked about, we have a pre-reception. We're adding a lot of new fun activations. There'll be an opportunity for guests to get their photos and autographs with Heisman Trophy winners, get their photos with the Heisman Trophy. We're going to have some other cool, fun activation stuff going on and during that event. This is an event that you can bring children to, especially, compared to an evening gala. That this type of event really lends itself to, bringing kids to the event. I think it's a great opportunity to kind of witness history firsthand and be a part of, this 90th celebration.
Well, Tim, thanks for all that information. To those of you listening, I can vouch for just how remarkable these events are surrounding Heisman weekend. I fully recommend you going to Heisman.com, looking into it, getting a ticket, and really just having an unforgettable experience at the Heisman brunch. Tim, thanks for coming on and telling us all about it.
Absolutely, Chris. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Tim, and we'll be right back with Ralph Russo. The Heisman is handed out every December, but the history of the trophy lives year-round at Heisman.com. Home to the most iconic trophy in sports, Heisman.com tells the stories of all 88 of our winners and features news, bios, and statistics on all your favorite Heisman heroes. Heisman.com also highlights our Heisman humanitarians, the many charities supported by the Heisman Trust, and so much more. Make Heisman.com your first stop for all things Heisman.
This is Archie Griffin, 1974, 1975's Heisman Trophy winner, and you're listening to the official Heisman podcast.
Welcome to the show, Ralph Russo of The Athletic. So many years, the college football writer for the Associated Press. Those of you out there who follow college football have no doubt read him over the years, maybe sometimes unknowingly. I think it's great that he's over at The Athletic now because I feel like he gets to really show his stuff and give his opinions more. And so it's a very exciting move. Ralph, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chris. Appreciate you having me on. And yeah, it's been interesting. Like, not to get too much into me, but like, spend 30 years at one place and then switch to another within the season. It was a little bit of a shock, but it's been a great opportunity and everything's going wonderfully. You've
been enjoying it pretty well, doing all your beats now?
To a certain degree, I'm basically doing the same job. I'm just doing it for a different company that gives me some different opportunities and leeway. And again, nothing but gratitude for all the time I spent at the AP. But, at a certain point in your career, when you get a chance to do something different, that's cool too. And that's what I had a chance to do here.
Does this mean you're not going to be coming to the Heisman Trophy ceremony?
It does not mean that. So there was some question about whether I was going to be covering because they have some different priorities and we have a lot of people. But it was actually my just last night, my editor told me, oh yeah, we want you to go to the Heisman.
Fantastic. So we'll see you there.
You'll see me again. Yes.
Awesome. So I want to just kind of get your viewpoint on everything that's going on in college football, but we'll keep it light and short as we can. But I'm curious, it seems like your beat for The Athletic has been the 12-team playoff and kind of talking about what's been going on with that. Where do you see how that's shaping up right now?
Yeah, I think the playoff has consumed a lot of college football because it's the first year and it's new and we're all trying to digest exactly what the playoff means to a certain degree and how it affects the regular season, what's the dynamic of like what games are big games. And so far, frankly, I think it's worked out great, right? Like Arizona State and BYU are going to play this weekend, and it's an enormous game. And back in the old system, it would not have been. So we have a lot of more interest in more places in college football and more fan investment and team investment in ways that I think have really been tremendous for the game.
Yeah. One thing I'm really curious about is how the fans are going to take to the playoff, not in the sense of all the extra games, but I get the sense that not everybody knows exactly how it works to get in. Everyone's like, okay, yeah, we want to make the 12-team playoff. Very good, fine. But I feel like we're now getting to the stage in the season where people are gonna be taking crash courses in the rules. At least the casual fans are, and I'm just really curious about how they're going to take all these rules and the way things work compared to before.
It is a quirky system, right? And I'm happy to run through it. And it is something like from someone who's covered it. And remember, I've been covering the transition to this system since 2021. So I'm very familiar with its quirks, but I can also understand why fans just a few weeks out are not, right? Just like we're going to do this thing now, and you still don't really understand how it works. So, it's the 5 highest ranked conference champions that get in, that are reserve spots. The top 4 get buys. So you can be the 10th ranked team, but the number 4 seed, right? And that's most likely the way it's going to work out with like a Big 12 or an ACC champion. There's 7 at-large bids with no cap on where those bids can go. Looks like the SEC and the Big 10 are going to pretty much scoop up most of those bids. But again, this idea of I could be the 3rd ranked team or the 2nd ranked team in the country, but also be the 5th seed or the 6th seed is something that I know I've tried to explain to people. I'm going to give ESPN credit for this too. I think that they've definitely made an effort to try to explain it in their broadcasts and games and the playoff rankings like we'll have later tonight. But I also understand why people might not be totally grasping it because they're just not paying really close attention.
How much of an impact do you think the playoff race is going to have on the Heisman race itself?
Yeah, it's funny. I think we talked about this maybe like last year when I was on your show, and I believe it's playing out similar to what I thought it might. A lot of this stuff we're stepping into the unknown, and it's been hard to understand how it's going to work. This one, I think we had a pretty good idea, and it seems to be playing out that way. And I think what it's doing is it's widening the field. I think we had gotten to a point where if you were not among the playoff contenders, it was getting trickier to be a Heisman candidate. Now, Jaden Daniels last year broke the mold, but he did it with a pretty historically great performance.
Yeah.
Right? He had to be up and be beyond, I think, a lot of other players and they had the benefit of maybe a couple of the playoff teams. You looked around and like, yeah, I don't really see a candidate on that playoff team. JJ McCarthy's a good player, but his stats aren't really built up. So I think Jaden was a little bit of breaking the mold of what we had seen normally. And I think what's happening now is a guy like Ashton Genty, who's an amazing player, but is also still in the playoff race. Travis Hunter, who's an amazing player, otherwise would not have been in the playoff race, is now in the playoff race. So I think those guys still could have been worthy contenders and Heisman contenders before. I do think it elevates their candidacies, so to speak.
Yeah, that makes sense. It kind of elevates the quote unquote less prominent players and maybe dampens the ceiling of the more prominent players in a sense is what it seems like so far this year, because we're not seeing a lot of, the top player on top team getting a whole lot of attention. Of course, I think the stats have kind of tapered off a bit as compared to what we've seen in recent years with Heisman challenging quarterbacks and so on and so forth. Before we go on to more Heisman, I just wanted to ask you one more thing about the playoff. Why does the committee release rankings every week. I know the answer is that they want to generate interest, but we have AP polls and coaches polls to sort of do that, and there's never any lack of things to talk about. But I was always thinking that maybe a reveal the way the NCAA tournament does for basketball at the end of the year, where you see the homework done or whatever at the end, versus having it go on week by week, and the anguish and the nerves and the tension among fan bases, which inevitably boils over when a team doesn't make it. Any insight on that, on why that is?
So, listen, as with most things in college football, it's very much a TV decision. I think ESPN likes having that engagement, and the show draws some. I don't think they're monster ratings, but I think the show does draw enough interest and enough ratings that it also keeps people thinking and talking about the playoff. I will say I'm with you. Like, I think that it becomes. I don't know if you need them every week. I think in some ways it puts the committee, quite frankly, in a little bit of a tough spot, because it allows them to be overly scrutinized 4 weeks out, when how much the ranking matters even is questionable. And now, because everybody is a conspiracy theorist, it's like, well, they're biased against this team, they're biased against that team. My school's getting the shaft, and this and that and the other thing. So I don't know if it necessarily helps the credibility of the system, but it does keep people talking about the system. I think what you could do, I don't want to get too long-winded here. I also think there's an element of owning the rankings and not letting the AP poll, the coaches poll, set the agenda for November. But I think what you might be able to do, and this is something they do with the NCAA basketball tournament, is do a look-in, right?
Yeah.
Where at this point of the season, here's what the committee is thinking. We're not going to come back next week and do this again, but on October 31st, this is what we're looking at.
Yeah.
And then maybe you hit it one more time in mid-November, 3 weeks later, and say, you know what? I think this is kind of what we're looking at now. And then now we'll come back to you at the end of the season, because you're right. I don't know if they're good for the game and the system. I do think that they are pretty good for TV and getting people talking about it. And I think for television networks, there's more value in that.
I mean, I personally think that one big reveal show would blow out all ratings compared to the cumulative, weekly rankings. But who am I to say? Right. Obviously, controversy and argument is the mother's milk of college football. So the 12-team playoff certainly gives more opportunities to argue, more data points to argue about. Heisman Trophy. This year, we're seeing players who typically would, at least in the last 15 years ago, which, I call the spread quarterback era since 2007, and Tim Tebow, we've had these quarterbacks that have pretty much put forth these incredible numbers, usually above 4,000 yards total offense, 43 touchdowns, I think is the average for the Heisman winning quarterback during that era. There's been a couple, there's been a running back, there's been Derrick Henry, and there has been receiver and Devonta Smith. Yeah. But this year we're seeing a two-way player in Travis Hunter of Colorado, and we're seeing a running back from Boise State in Ashton Genty. And we're seeing Cam Ward, formerly of Washington State, over at Miami, and we're seeing Dylan Gabriel, formerly of two other schools at Oregon. And what's interesting to me, and I think it's kind of part and parcel with the direction the overall sport is heading, in which the whole recruiting game that we used to follow is sort of dead now, right? It's basically some kind of bidding on players. It's sort of a black box. We don't really know what goes into these decisions the way we did previously. But all four of those players I just mentioned, who I think at this point are pretty likely, or maybe the favorites to be the four finalists, except for Travis Hunter, not highly recruited out of high school. And not in the sense that these were like the elite athletes. Hunter was obviously an elite athlete. Do you think that this is a harbinger of things to come, because in this new era with the transfer portal and NIL and the ability of teams to just suddenly, create a team from scratch that competes, like look at Indiana,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to see a lot of more of these types of Heisman races where it's not dominated by spread quarterbacks and it's sort of a mishmash of things? Or is this just a year that doesn't really have a rhyme or reason?
I do think that this is more likely to be an outlier season, which is good. It does keep it more interesting. I love the idea that like it's an interesting, different looking field, and you're getting pulling some teams in here or some players in here who don't fit a lot of like the more recent traditional model.
Yeah.
I don't know if necessarily. I will say this. I do think the transfer portal, because there's been a bunch of transfers that have won the award recently. That's become a normal thing. I do wonder if because of the transfer portal, you see more interesting development stories like Cam Ward. We talked about Indiana. I think if there's a player who has a chance to, sort of surge at the end, I think if Indiana were to beat Ohio State this weekend, suddenly Curtis Rourke's name, my guess is that would be a pretty prominent one. And maybe Will Howard, if Ohio State wins, the winning quarterback of that game has the potential, the stage to get in there. And that's another guy. Like, neither of those players were highly rated. But I do wonder if the transfer portal has a path for good players at maybe teams that they would have been flown under the radar throughout their career to then, like a Cam Ward, to find themselves on bigger stages at the end of their career and become, not just the under-recruited kid who had a great college career, but the under-recruited kid who has a great college career and ends his college career that started at Incarnate Word at Miami, right? So I do wonder if that dynamic and allowing some of these kids to transfer up creates more players like Cam Ward.
Mm-hmm. It's a great point. And, getting back to the playoff real quick, Indiana, we mentioned Indiana earlier and Curtis Rourke potentially being a late-breaking Heisman candidate because they do play Ohio State at noon on Saturday, this coming Saturday. And one of the things about Indiana that's interesting, most of the time when you see a team of a program of that stature going on a great run, it's a lot of smoke and mirrors happening. Usually they're winning some close games, they're Cinderella, but Indiana's been dominant for the most part. They have a top 3 offense and a top 5 ranked defense. They're very good on both sides of the ball. And until they beat Michigan by 5, no one had come within 14 points of them. And until I think some point in the 8th game, they had not even trailed all season. And yet, I understand that they are number 5 in the playoff rankings, but it seems like there's a couple teams that have not been quite as dominant that are ranked ahead of them. And it still seems that there's still this, I don't know if it's a conscious bias, but Indiana has more to prove than Ohio State does or Texas does because they're Indiana. It still doesn't seem fair.
Indiana, and I'll pat myself on the back for this one. When the first playoff rankings came out, 3 weeks ago now, I wrote a column that said Indiana is going to be the most interesting playoff contender. And because of some of what we're talking about, they are a flashpoint in 2 directions. I think some people look at Indiana and think, that's a pretty good team. And I don't think they're getting enough respect because they're not a blue blood. They're not Ohio State. They're not Texas. They're not Penn State. Teams that they're all behind, but they're undefeated. But then I also think, and this I think is a fair criticism, they haven't played a tough schedule. It's been actually really like it is without question the weakest of the schedules among the contenders, but they have beaten the tar out of those teams.
Yes,
and that's meaningful. Like I am a big, like, it's not just who you played, it's how you played. So it is super meaningful that they have been as dominant on their way in a season where Ole Miss lost to Kentucky, Tennessee lost to Arkansas, Notre Dame lost to NIU. Like, taking care of business and doing it emphatically almost every week is a really important part of it. So I think Indiana is sort of stuck in between two arguments. Hey, they're not getting enough respect. Look at the blue bloods ahead of them that haven't been as dominant. Oh no, they're getting too much respect. Look at these other teams that have played much harder schedules that are stacked up behind them. How would they stack up against Tennessee or Ole Miss, right? So I think that they are a fascinating team. We're going to find out a whole lot more about them on a Saturday against Ohio State. And, I'm going to be like, listen, I'm like, part of me wants to see this season get rewarded, but I will also be fair. Like, if they come out and Ohio State runs them out of the horseshoe, I'm going to be a little more skeptical of what I had seen the first 10 weeks.
Well, what if they beat Ohio State by a touchdown? Are they number one in the country?
I don't know if they're number one. You could probably make a good argument, because if you're starting like how that common opponent thing.
And in the horseshoe.
Yeah, right. Oregon beat them at home by 1. And if Indiana wins, by 7 or 10 on the road, that's a hell of a win. My guess is they probably don't get to number one, but it goes back to that flashpoint, right? Are they getting too much respect considering their overall schedule, or are we not giving them enough respect because it's Indiana and we want Indiana? It just doesn't feel right? Like Indiana has to prove themselves double, right? Because of the history, and neither of those. I don't know if either of those arguments for or against them is totally fair.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be a great game on Saturday. That's for sure. Question about coaching. Think back to when that point in your career, not your career specifically, but in journalism, where writers had to suddenly start doing social media and podcasts, and it wasn't just enough to go out and write your story. You had to go and do all the videos. Everyone had to learn it. Some people were better at it than others, and I think some people who weren't as good at it maybe didn't proceed as fast as some of their cohorts. The reason I'm bringing this up is I think it relates to coaching in this era in college football, where it seems like there are some coaches that were really good before this new environment took hold, and they're struggling in the new environment. And then there's some coaches that maybe we didn't know how good they were because under the old environment, they were at disadvantages. Perhaps based on, situations can make a coach great, right? So do you think we're seeing that with coaching where the job description is completely different than what it was when a lot of these coaches got into the profession, and maybe we're seeing some coaches having a hard time adjusting?
So the two people who come to mind quickly in that discussion, and I don't know if it's solely the reason, but I think that they're like, if I'm extrapolating your theory, and I think of Lincoln Riley struggling at USC, and I think of Brian Kelly, having some ups and downs, certainly down this year and down the last 3 weeks that they haven't won a game at LSU. I don't think you can have the conversation about those coaches without saying how much of this is about the environment, right? Like, I don't know if it's fully the answer, but I think you're not thinking about it in the right way if you're not saying, like, maybe this person's issue is they're having a hard time with the idea that you have to be a little bit of a general manager and that the field is sort of leveled to a certain degree because of NIL and transfer portal. So you can't just hoard certain amount of talent. And the coaches who are adjusting to those things. And again, we're sort of talking very anecdotally about all this stuff.
Sure.
I think of like Dan Lanning and Kenny Dillingham, who are both having terrific years, and some of these younger coaches who I've talked to them about it and wrote a story about it actually, at the beginning of the season, this sort of like, hey, like, I'm not here to complain about the changes. I just got to adapt. Right. And I do wonder if certain coaches, their methods and the way they've gone about things, it's a little harder for them to adapt, not because they're even belligerent or they don't want to, but hey, man, I've been doing it this way for 20 years.
Yeah.
I got to figure out a way to do it, as opposed to a Dan Lanning or a Dillingham who's like, hey, man, I've only been in this job for 10 years as an assistant. So it's a little easier for me to adapt.
Right. Makes total sense. And of course, we're probably going to have some even more changes coming up soon, and hopefully kind of level things off and stabilize things with those rules.
Hopefully.
Another thing you wrote about recently is officiating. And this is kind of a curious topic for me, because it seems to, like you talked about in the recent story you wrote about officiating, talking about Utah's athletic director complaining about that big call and how out of the ordinary that is, and you're kind of warning people not to fall into the conspiracy of this type of thing. And it's funny because, again, that's kind of college football fans are always sort of paranoid about these things. And now that there's a lot of money involved, and there's, money very visibly involved, there's always been money involved, but not in this kind of visible way.
Sure.
It seems like it's maybe possibly going to feed into more conspiracy theories, because now there's motives. There's a lot of gambling involved now with football. It's like very open. And I've noticed, and it could just be confirmation bias, anecdotal evidence. When I watch games now, I feel like they're holding on every play. So in some of these games in ways that I hadn't seen before. And am I taking crazy pills, or what's going on?
So, I have got a lot of like different ways my mind goes with officiating. I tend to be a little more protective is not the right word. I tend to try to push back against the concept that the officiating is worse than ever.
Yeah.
I just don't know if that's even possible, because there's so much more training and things along those lines.
And how can you measure it anyway?
Yeah, and the game is getting harder to officiate. Let's make that clear at all levels, because the athleticism is crazy, and it's a little harder to find officials. I think that I definitely think officiating needs to be better. I definitely think that college football needs to be more, and this is always a problem in college football, Chris, and you understand this because you've been around the sport, right? No one's really in charge of the greater good.
Yeah.
And I think that would help officiating if there was sort of a little more of the conferences giving up control, maybe an outside, really empowered body that trains officials and gets and coordinates officials in a way. I think that might help. What I wrote about, when it comes to after what happened with Utah, is more of, I don't know if it serves the purpose of making things better if people in leadership positions are using the really inflammatory language of, this was stolen from us.
Yeah, fair point.
And not to just single out Mark Harlan at Utah, but Kirby Smart said something similar in the Texas game, and they won the Texas game. And he was talking about they tried to steal it from us with that weird, and it was a botched process, though they got the call right in the end.
Right.
The process was botched. So I get it. I think officiating does need to be better, and I think that there are probably good ways to systematically work on that. But I also am very leery of fanning the flames of, this is rigged, this is purposeful, the conference office is pulling the strings here or there. Like, I just think that those are two separate issues, and we can work on them. And people in leadership positions should not be, pushing, allowing everything is sort of being pulled by, everything is being dictated by money behind the scenes.
Right.
You shouldn't be feeding into that.
Yeah, that's a great point. It seems to be a societal issue broadly. I'm going to finish with this one question. It's been gnawing at me for a long time, and I've been thinking about it in my head, how to best go about investigating this. And let me tell you, maybe you'll hear this and think, oh, that's a great idea to investigate. And if you do, you've got to come on the show again and talk about it, or give me full credit for instigating this.
Okay.
I want to know, Ralph, whatever happened to the ineligible athlete?
Yeah. So,
there used to be one, maybe two on every team every year. And the last 8 or 9 years, they've gone away.
So I got a couple of different theories. It's interesting. I got a couple of different theories on that. And like, I think one is good and one is maybe a little more nefarious, right?
Mm-hmm.
I do think schools are better now. Well, and this has a double-edged sword to it. I think schools are better now than ever before about keeping their players eligible. Now, the good part of that is I do think that there's real concerted effort to make sure that, like, there are staffers, right? There's an academic staff and people who are literally, their job is make sure the players are staying on top of their academic stuff, right?
Right.
So when you have that much support and guidance, I think it helps in a good way players matriculate towards an education.
Sure.
Now, the other side of that is I think schools are very good at figuring out how to keep guys eligible, even if that means, maybe they're not taking the hardest courses or like we're giving.
And guys are going to like 3 schools in 3 years. Like, I mean, how do you they transferring the units and getting everything over there and adjusting to all that, and yet you never see any casualties of that.
Yeah, and again, I do think that like it's part. There's 2 sides of that coin. Again, like we have gotten very good at figuring out how to keep people eligible.
Yeah.
And the promising side of that is guys are getting degrees and maybe they are like getting real education. Mm-hmm. And we're figuring out how to but the problem side, the downside of that, I think is you can push anybody through and you can figure out a way to keep them eligible just to sort of like, hey man, like we're going to get you these 3 online classes and it'll all work out in the end. Yeah. I just think that the schools have gotten good at, I don't want to say gaming that system because that might be a little too cynical, but I think they've just gotten good at figuring out how to get it done.
You may be right, but I think they all got good at this around the exact same time because before that they were all in the same boat. Anyway, Ralph Russo, thanks for joining us at last moment's notice to come on the show today. It was a great conversation. Loved your opinions. I love seeing you over at the Athletic. Tell our audience where they can find you when you're not at the Athletic.
Yeah, well, very easy on social, and I haven't necessarily migrated to other platforms. Probably will at some point, just to sort of spread the wealth around, spread my goodness around. But the easy way to find me, again, like all my articles are at the Athletic, and if you don't have a subscription, there's a ton of great people there to subscribe for, and me. So hopefully I'm part of that. And on social media, very easy. At Ralph D. Russo at Ralph D. Russo ATH. For a long time, it was at Ralph D. Russo AP, but now it's at Ralph D. Russo ATH.
Yeah, just type in Ralph Russo, but look out, there's another Ralph Russo who has a blue check who is definitely not the Ralph Russo I'm talking to right now. So anyway. All right, Ralph, thanks again, and we'll see you down the road. See you in New York.
Yeah, thank you, Chris.
This is Carson Palmer, 2002 Heisman Trophy winner, and you are listening to the official Heisman Podcast.
Thanks so much for tuning into this week's official Heisman Trophy Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to like, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Your support helps us reach more listeners just like you and keeps us motivated to bring you great content each week. Don't forget to follow us on social media for updates, behind-the-scenes content, and more. Any other feedback or questions, just email us at pod@heisman.com or just drop us a note on our social media platform. So I've got a good friend, let's call him JP. He's a huge fan of the California Golden Bears. The man has what he himself calls a sickness. He just can't quit his Bears. Now, I've been sending JP links to the podcast. You know, that's what you do to your friends. You send them your stuff and you hope they support it. Well, our next guest is Noel Williams, premier cornerback for the California Golden Bears. And Williams is going to break down for us what it's like to get a pick. And after the interview, I am once again going to send the link to this podcast to my friend JP, tell him that there's a Cal Bear player on the podcast this week, and then see if he listens. Because I'm not sure if he's really been listening to this point. But if he hears this segment, he's going to have to mention it to me later. Noel Williams of the University of California, currently the nation's leader in interceptions with 7, also second in pass breakups with 14. Thanks for coming on the official Heisman Trophy podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Interceptions are one of the hardest plays to execute in football, but also one of the most exciting to witness. If it's okay with you, I want to delve into the specifics of what it's like to snag a pick, the craft of defending a pass, and all the things that go into it. You ready?
Yes, sir.
How much of getting an interception is instinct versus preparation? Do you study specific tendencies in quarterbacks or receivers to anticipate those opportunities?
I for sure anticipate the opportunities, throughout the week. It goes into film study and, reading, make sure you're reading the right keys before the play. And then during the play, it's all instinct, knowing what's going to happen before it happens, and just trusting my preparation, my coaching, and my skills, and my eyes and my feet.
It seems like a lot of interceptions take place in the final 2 minutes of either half as offenses try to put together drives. As a defensive back, are you an extra high alert to be ready for a pass that might be forced by the quarterback in those situations?
For sure, because I know that's a situation where they have to pass the ball. If it's the last 2 minutes of the half or end the game, I know kind of what they do, studying their 2 minute offense during the week. And say it's the end of the half, I know they're trying to get out of bounds. If they're, depending on where they're on the field, are they beating the play clock? Are they behind the play clock? So all that plays a part into it. And then end the game, it's kind of like quarterback wants to rush downfield sometimes if he's not an experienced QB. So they tend to make some mistakes throwing it down the middle or throwing it outside, not being on the same communication with their receiver. So I for sure want to take advantage of those opportunities and just trusting my coaching, just getting the call.
Yeah. What's going through your head as a play unfolds? Are you reading the quarterback's eyes or the receiver's movements or both?
Kind of both. I'll kind of see, QBs kind of peek at you, see what you're in, and you just kind of it's like spidey senses, you kind of get this thing going like, oh, they're going to go at me. So you kind of look at the formation and then just play your keys, make sure your eyes are right on the man, depending on what call it is, because you can get interceptions in any call, cover 2, cover 1, cover 3. So depending on the coverage, I got to make sure my eyes are right. If my eyes are supposed to be in the backfield on the QB, clued to the QB, they're supposed to be cued on the QB. If it's man, just eyes on my man. And then when he gets out his break, I get out my break. And then I can get my eyes back to the ball.
What are the most important skills or techniques that you rely on to put yourself in the right position to make an interception?
I would say my feet at the line of scrimmage. Just make sure I went at the line of scrimmage, trying to mirror his release, and then staying top shoulder, not falling behind the receiver.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say those are the things that are important to me. Just winning at the line, because if I don't get an interception, it'll be incomplete, and that helps us win either way. But interceptions are better.
Yeah. Can you describe the feeling of actually getting an interception in the heat of a game? Like, what's running through your mind as you make that play? I mean, does it just everything happen too fast to even think?
Everything does happen fast. The more they come, though, it kind of slows down. But when you have the ball in your hands, it's like you're just happy you made a play, a momentum shift for your team, whatever situation you guys are in. Just happy was able to contribute, give the ball back to my offense. And, it kind of goes fast. It's been slowing down lately because now, I kind of had a knack for the ball. So it's kind of slowed down a little bit, but beginning of the season's kind of happened all fast, kind of blur.
How much of that is just kind of luck? Sometimes the ball bounces the right way. Sometimes you're just in the right place at the right time. Is it just a combination of all those things?
Yeah, it's a combination of everything. Just doing my job, and sometimes the ball will just end up in your hands, and capitalizing on the mistakes the QBs make, the receivers make, what the offense make, and I just gotta know when the time is right to maybe take a risk, maybe just do my job. So it's kind of everything's a combination.
Yeah. And after you make the interception, how do you suddenly shift gears to thinking about returning the ball? Are you just looking around for blockers, open space, trying to secure the ball?
Yeah, if I catch an interception and still on my feet, I try to hit the sideline first, or if it's just kind of money situation, just get as many yards as possible. Make sure there's no double turnovers. Make sure I have the ball high and tight. Make sure I just get as many yards as possible, get good field position.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Have there been moments where you missed an interception that taught you something crucial? Like, how do you bounce back and improve from that kind of situation?
just don't get in your own head, just next play mentality, because that might not be your only opportunity. Can't dwell on, as a DB, you got to have short-term memory.
Mm-hmm.
And just know you're going to get another opportunity. Might not be this game, might be the next game, might be 2 games from now, but you're going to get the opportunity again because QB's got to pass it, in this day and age of college football.
Yeah, you got 14 career interceptions, 7 this year. 4 of them have come on the road. And, Cal's had 4 big trips to the East Coast this year.
Yeah.
Does it make a difference whether you're on the road or at home? Is one easier than the other?
It doesn't really make a difference to me, but I would say being on the road does, it just, you have a chip on your shoulder knowing everybody in the stadium is not with you and your team is just kind of like your team versus everybody. So it's kind of like a different mindset, I would say. On the road, you got to be road warriors. That's what Coach Wilcox always preaches. Got to be road warriors. And but being at home, getting an interception at home is probably better because, people are actually cheering for you. So I don't know. They're both good. Like hearing the roar of the crowd and then silence in the crowd,
Right. Is there a particular interception in your career that stands out as your favorite or your most meaningful? And what made it so special?
I would say the second pick in Auburn, that was a meaningful interception for me because they're going to drive. I think they're 2 minutes, 2-minute drill, and it was 21-14. And I feel like that was like the dagger, like really, because after I got the interception, fans started leaving. The crowd, like everybody just gave up. So it was like it took the air out the building for sure.
I guess that is something that defensive backs have in their arsenal. They can help clear a stadium, for sure, right?
For sure.
But what advice would you give to a young cornerback who wants to excel at reading the game and making the kind of big plays that you've made all year?
I would say just keep working on your craft, keep working on your change of direction, just keep watching the game, keep learning the game. There's always something you can learn every day playing defensive back. And, the process, you can put all this work, the results might not show until 1 year, 2 years, 3 years from now. Just keep going, because defensive back is a hard position. You might be in good position and you still don't make the play. You just got to keep going, keep your head up.
You guys are 5-5 this year, but you've lost 4 really close games. You could very easily have 8 or 9, 10 wins.
Yeah.
You guys have Stanford coming up this weekend. What's the mood like for you guys getting ready for the big game?
I feel like the energy's up in the building. Always for the big game. I know I think it's the oldest rivalry in college football, and just trying to put on for the people that came before me, people that are going to come after me, and the community, and just trying to keep the acts in Berkeley. So we're definitely on edge this week. All the coaches are on edge this week, and it's going to be a fun, exciting game for sure.
Well, Noah Williams, thanks for coming on the show. Congratulations on a great season, great career, and we wish you the best of luck in the future.
Thank you, Chris. Nice talking to you.
Thank you.
This is Ricky Williams, 1998 Heisman Trophy winner, and you're listening to the official Heisman Trophy podcast.
So our next guest is arguably the top tight end in the country. Harold Fannin Jr. of Bowling Green is a junior, and he is second in the nation in receiving yardage at 117 yards per game on the season through 10 games. He has 83 catches for 1,170 yards, 8 touchdowns, 6'4", 230 pounds, a man of few words, but he makes his presence known on the football field. You're going to hear more about him soon. Let's go talk to Harold Fannin Jr. Harold Fannin Jr. of Bowling Green, thanks for coming on the official Heisman Trophy podcast.
Yep, thank you for having me.
Your team's coming off a big 31-13 victory over Western Michigan, a game in which you had 10 catches for 137 yards and 2 touchdowns. Falcons have now won 4 in a row and 5 of 6, tied for first place in the MAC. What was the mood like in the locker room after that game, and how did you guys approach the bye week from a preparation standpoint?
The move in the locker room, it was great. Obviously, big win. Needed to, obviously for our goals or whatever. And, for the bye week, we just mainly focus on just getting healthy.
Bowling Green is now 6-4, but all 4 of your losses this season have been close. They've been hard-fought games, including against 2 ranked teams on the road. There are no moral victories, but it seems like this Bowling Green team is one of the most underrated teams out there right now. When did you have a sense that this could be a pretty good team?
I knew it since fall camp, all the work the guys put in, the coaches, everybody. I knew, coming into this year that we had a good shot at, making a run for it.
Yeah. You had a pretty decent game to start out the year, 6 catches for 67 yards against Fordham, but then you really exploded against Penn State in Beaver Stadium with what were then career highs of 11 catches for 137 yards. Looking at the matchups going into that game, did you have a feeling that you were going to do pretty well? And how much confidence did it give you afterwards to play so well on the road?
Always got confidence because of the work we put in. I never really look at the matchups. I just think about just doing my job, whatever that is. And I'm glad it played out like that.
You even attempted a pass in that game and came pretty close to completing it. You've attempted 1 pass each year of your career, but you're now 0 for 3, unfortunately. Are you hoping you get a chance to complete one before it's all over?
Yeah, man. Still wishing for him.
Ever since that game, you've been on an absolute tear, putting up all kinds of crazy numbers for a tight end. There's one play in particular, a 65-yard touchdown run against Texas A&M, that I think really showcased your talents. What do you remember most about that play?
Like a busted coverage, and then I just caught the ball and just do what I always do. Just make something happen.
Yep. You come from Canton, Ohio, went to McKinley High, which has quite a few famous alums. When did you get involved in football? Did you play any other sports as well?
I played baseball my senior year. That's about it when it comes to high school.
So just baseball and then football. But what attracted you to playing football?
Actually, my grandfather, when I was younger, we used to always sit down and just watch football. So He basically got me into that.
Did you have any favorite teams growing up?
No, but my brother, he loved the Steelers, so always had to watch the Steelers.
Right. You were a linebacker, defensive back, and a receiver in high school. What was your recruiting process like?
My sophomore year, I got a couple MAC offers, to play DB, and then coaches got fired, COVID hit, stopped going to school for a little bit. So then I basically, lost all my offers off of that.
Yeah.
In my senior year, talked to a few schools and, just wanted to continue to play offense. So Bowling Green gave me the shot. So I came here.
We've had a lot of players from Texas on the show this season, and they like to brag about their state's high school football, but you're literally from the place where the Hall of Fame resides. Tell our audience a little bit what Ohio football is like.
Man, it's like just where it started. So, it's very competitive, I would say. It's a little different from like those southern states because, it get real cold up here. Mm-hmm. So you get a lot of grit and stuff like that. But honestly, them was my best years, man, in high school.
Yeah. Bowling Green came along, said they wanted you to play tight end. How long did it take for you to wrap your head around playing this new position?
I would say until, I guess, first day of camp with pads on. I'm like, all right, I'm really in here playing tight end. It's different. Bigger guys, stuff like that.
What was the most challenging aspect about switching over and playing that spot? And what do you love most about the position?
The most challenging part, I would say, would be because in high school, I was more of outspread. So I didn't have to really maneuver, do traffic and stuff like that. I say that was the more challenging part. And the part I love the most is obviously, you always in the progression, close to the quarterback so he always can see you.
Yeah. You line up all over the field, sometimes as an inline blocker, sometimes in the slot, sometimes wide or in motion. What's your favorite place to line up, and what do you consider your bread and butter play call?
Me, keep it simple. I like lining up out wide and going and getting the ball.
What do you need to work on to become a more complete tight end?
I probably would say more of inline blocking. You know, I don't really get a lot of that on tape, so I'll probably say like more of that.
Yeah, the tight end position, of course, is one of the great weapons in the modern football era. Who are some tight ends you look at and try to model your game after?
I don't really watch tight ends, but you know, when I think about it, probably like Travis Kelce, what's his name, Gronkowski. You know, one I used to always see. It's probably like them.
Well, here's a name that you should check out, a guy named Shannon Sharp. I think you have a lot of similar attributes as him. Did you know that 2 tight ends have actually won the Heisman before?
I have not. I did not know.
Of course, both those guys play defense, but one was actually from Ohio. He won it in 1936. You're listed at 6'4", 230. Do you envision playing at this weight in the future, or do you think you can still bulk up some more?
Oh, I can bulk up some more.
Yeah, and not lose that speed.
Yeah.
What do you like to do when you're not playing football?
I like to fish, play the game, stream.
You like to actually go on the lake and fish, or?
Yeah, like like a little pond or something. Not too big. Yeah, get all the angles.
Yeah. What's your favorite fish to catch?
Bass.
Bass. You eat it afterwards, or do you throw it back?
Nah. Just throw it back. Yeah.
And finally, who've been the biggest influences both on and off the football field for you?
Man, that's a great question. I'll probably just say my coaches.
The coaches?
Yeah, I'll say my coaches. You know, always just hold me accountable, stuff like that, making sure I'm doing the right things.
Well, Harold Fannin Jr., thanks for coming on the official Heisman Trophy podcast. Good luck against Ball State on Saturday and the rest of the season.
Yep, thank you.
Well, that'll do it for this week's show. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I did. Special thanks goes out to Ralph Russo, to the University of California Golden Bears, and to the Bowling Green Falcons. Thanks for all your help in getting this show done. Next week, Miami's Cam Ward returns to the show. Last time he was on the show, last year he was a Washington State Cougar. No more. Also, Penn State tight end Tyler Warren and the Athletics' Stuart Mandel. See you next week. The official Heisman Trophy podcast streams every Wednesday during the college football season and is hosted, co-produced, edited, and engineered by Chris Houston. Paul Goldberg is the executive producer and editor. Special shout out to Isaac Lowenkron, and big thanks to the Heisman Trophy Trust and its executive director Rob Whalen and associate director Tim Henning. The official Heisman Trophy podcast can be found on Spotify, Apple Music, and anywhere you listen to your favorite podcasts. You can also find clips of our show on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Just go to @HeismanTrophy.